Good morning. So this is a GM recap and reflections video on last night's foray into Sword Wizardry Continual Light. This may be the first time I've run Sword Wizardry Continual Light for any online groups. I can't remember. I've run so many OSRs, both locally and online, that I'm not always can't always remember whether I have or not, but I'm pretty sure I have talked about this quite often, and I've thought about offering sessions many, many times, and I think last night would be the first time ever online I was able to do this. Um, this is my favorite simple d20 OSR. Again, I have a lot of favorites, so take that with a grain of salt. I usually don't play or talk about games that aren't favorites, so you can take that with a grain of salt. I wouldn't be playing it if it wasn't a favorite, but this is indeed because of the nature of the. It really does call down to the very nature and the nitty gritty of the most important aspects of the fantasy D20 game, and what I mean by that, we don't sacrifice the ability to level past 7. He doesn't sacrifice the ability to play certain races and classes. He does not sacrifice all of the extraneous classes like Bard and Paladin, and so we get all of that depth in a game this simple. It uses D20 and D6, and it seems to call out all of the things that would be in the hands of the DM, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is I let the players know before the session what I would be doing that isn't in these rules. I would be using a reaction table borrowed from Moldvay. I would be using the retainer table. I would be using morale. None of those things are in this book because leaves. This book is really for the players. Most rule books are for the players, and of course, the GM needs to know, how to treat the players fairly when it comes to rules of combat and saving throws and magic, etc. That's what a rule book does. But no concern about what my job on my side of the table might be and what kind of tools I like to use. So this is something we never talk about. We talk about simple rules. How much of the rules are for the GM and how much of the rules are for the players? And the minute it goes into the book, it becomes literal. And some GMs don't like that, right? They don't like being told how to check reaction tables. They want to do their own thing, or they don't want to be told, how to roll the treasure up. They got their own books and their own tables. Myself, I have my own Wandering Monsters. I have my own random encounter tables. I have my own reaction table. I have my own. So most GMs have a toolbox that they use for all their games, especially if it's OSR, because most GMs can run any version of these games. Where they're going to be a hangup is if the players are thinking of rules that aren't accounted for, or they start assuming the GM is using a particular rule set and expect the GM to adhere to a particular thing. So why do I like this as a GM? It defines everything we need to play without telling me anything else. However, I'm free to bring to the table any of those things, which I also made sure that all the players knew there would be these things. They didn't have to know. They didn't have to know if I'm making reaction checks. I don't have to know if I'm making Wandering Monster checks. They just get to be characters in a world. However, I like the players to know kind of how I'm doing the thing. Once we've played a while, it won't matter, right? They'll trust me. They'll know that, oh, was this a reaction check, Jason? I'm curious. So as an example, last night, so I wanted to just do a one-off because we've been trying to get back to Simbaroom, but one of the players had suggested he would not be able to make it this week at all, and so I don't want to play Simbaroom without him. So I said, one of the things I've been working toward is I want to get back to running more OSRs, and the only time I get to run this is with my local group, and I have not seen or played with my local group in months, longer even than the break I had online. And part of that's because they have a new baby. So, when you get a new baby, your life changes completely. So Brian and Katie, it's like, okay, new baby, their life is completely different. So it's just not, there's no room in their lives right now to insert this. So and I do totally respect that. Life comes first, right? So But I was gone for months anyway, so that's just that deal. So bottom line is, so I said, hey, I want to get back to, I want to run a mold bay or, something a little more traditional. However, I really wanted to go with something that was also easy to pick up. I think it's like $1 a PDF. You can get us in a buck. I got it for $7 from Amazon, a couple of versions. Plus, I have the PDF. It's cheap, it's easy, and the players could use almost any version of d20 to create their characters, and then we just have to make sure, I would bring to the table what they, what trumps their information, like bin doors. There's no bin doors, open doors, bin bars in this book. So they might make a character from Holmes and tell me, hey man, I got a 1 or 2 bin doors. It's not in this book, but yeah, you want to bin the bars? Go ahead, man, make that roll 1 or 2. It works. I mean, it's what I would do anyway as a GM, right? So anyway, long story short, and I said I'll offer a mini module because I have a set of 8 mini modules made for Sword and Wizardry. And I rarely run these things. I think I've talked about this already. I rarely run pre-written material by somebody else. That doesn't mean I don't run my own prepared pre-written material. I want to make that clear. I have run many prepared sessions, but it's all my own stuff. I've written the material, or it's prepared material, or it's from my own work. So when I say I don't run pre-written material, I mean I don't run store-bought, over-the-counter, other people's stuff. I just have never been comfortable doing that. But I have done it a few times, maybe 5 times in my entire career. And I've enjoyed it, but I've always felt like I was missing something. I always felt like I was leaving something out, or I always felt like whoops, I might have jumped the gun on that spider. I didn't see the fine print, so the spider comes out if they're in block 16 of, right, something where I missed it, right? So I always felt like I might bungle it, so to speak. And also, I like players to have a unique experience. I don't want to run something that they've already been through 3 times with somebody else, right? Okay, or that they've run themselves and they kind of know. So I like providing my own stuff. But anyway, I made the offer. Hey, I can run a mini, and we can do it in one night. Well, I also never generally start a game with him. I mean, I started Ivan and Josh in an Iron Falcon module. I literally started them standing out front of the dungeon door, and they were able to finish that entire module in one sitting, right, on YouTube live, Ivan and Josh. So there's an example of me literally placing them at the foot of the dungeon door, and they go right through the door and right smack into the dungeon. This time I wanted to introduce a little bit of world building, because if we connect these modules together and make a little mini campaign out of it, or if they just want to, I just want to offer one-offs once in a while. I want them to be able to come comfortably knowing a little bit about the world setting. But because they're going into unknown world and they're going into unknown lands, they're learning all the culture at the same time I'm presenting it. So it's really is world building live, and it allows them to not worry about knowing the history and the lore of the world. They don't have to worry about knowing the canon of the world we've left. They only have to worry about their character and what they learn as they go and what they present. If they present to me that he comes from a city, if David says to me my elf was brought up in a strict environment of magic schooling, that is his elf's culture. That's his elf's background, and it matters. It matters to him, and it matters to how he perceives the world I put in front of him. My expression of a new culture of elves doesn't have to be the culture he grew up in. And so it just allows us to all embrace the new mystery, and allows us all to embrace not having to recognize or know beforehand some lore, whether it's IP like Tolkien, or books that we're basing it on, or already accepted material like Greyhawk or something. Okay. So with that said, I wanted to, give them a little bit about where they're leaving. They're leaving the known world, which is old, based on, an old empire civilization that abandoned the country a long time ago. And there's a giant wall, Hadrian's Wall. I was going to call it Adrian's Wall, but I thought that would be a little too much. So I just talked about the remnants left from this great civilization that abandoned the region, and you're crossing over into that unknown world. Okay. I put them at a crossroads. This was to give them a chance to not do the mini module. It was I wasn't going to define what was going left, literally left at the Y. right, they were able to see that there was the city of Farendale, and there was a parchment of an elven smith that was looking to hire adventurers in Farendale. Go this way, 3 miles. And then obliterated from the signage on the tree was what was to the left, northwest. And of course, they could have gone that way. And I have something available if they had headed that direction. It would have just been my pre-written material, not purchased pre-written material. So they chose to go with the mini module direction. Well, again, I'm not going to just have them go 3 miles and have the obligatory conversation with the blacksmith standing in the street, and they then just ride off directly headed for the mine, which we could do and we have done and is very normal and very comfortable. I wanted them to see the world. I wanted them to become a part of the place, part of the situation. I wanted them to meet Wellen from the mini module. Wellen is the person in the module who they greet and meet that will ask them to do this duty. So the module, I introduce him there, but I introduce not only him, I introduce the city. I introduce the village. I introduce the culture of the elves. I introduce a potential war with the dwarves, which is not in the module, right? All that's in the module is any city, any town, anywhere. Here's this guy who needs this done, right? That's the module. So we're free as GMs to take these modules and drop them into our own worlds, drop them into our own campaigns. That's what makes modules great, because we can put them in our own stuff. So that's what I did. And this is why I love role playing. This is why I say there is no rule that keeps us from role playing. There is no mechanism that keeps us from role playing. There is no complicated game that keeps us from role playing. There is no magic simplicity that makes role playing better or easier. There is just the opportunity for the players to be in the game, in the world as characters, and express themselves, learn about the world, talk to people, talk to each other. That's all I'm looking for. That's all I want as a player. It's all I want from my players. I want them to be able to express their character. I want them to be able to play as a player. That doesn't mean they're not strategizing as human beings as a character in the world. I'm okay with that. It's part of role play. Whether they know it or not, when they're strategizing as a player, they're actually thinking about it as their character and the consciousness of their character. Now, when it comes to literally life or death decisions, when they've been playing a character that's never cared about whether he dies or not, that's when we start to question. I thought your character didn't care. He was on a suicide mission. That's when we start seeing contradictions between character and player motives. If a player is motivated to protect himself, then I assume his character is therefore motivated to protect himself. So it's all role play. As much as Dell and I discuss the immersive first person avenues to uninterrupted kind of character play, that's just one way to do it. In my opinion, it's all role playing. I've talked before about whether it's shallow kind of avatar, say obligatory comment as you wage war against the goblins, right? Okay, but that's still role playing in that you have a role in the party generally, right? So they meet Wellen, they learn a little bit about this culture, they learn a little bit about what's going on around them. Wellen then has they learn more what Wellen is looking for, and they all agree to pursue it. It took us 2 hours, and they still haven't reached the module. And this is why I love role playing. And I talked about this before. I like slow burn gaming sometimes. Sometimes I don't, because sometimes the genre of the style of game you're running maybe shouldn't be slow burn. I've talked about like High Adventure, Conan. Those should be quick. For me, I run a Conan type session with a little bit of speed, with a little bit of, you get to think less in my Conan type games, right? I'm going to ask you to move faster through this narrative, right? I definitely treat Conan more like High Adventure. If I'm doing an Indiana Jones type game, it's going to be less a slow burn. It's going to be moving quickly from scene to scene, and there's going to be, right. That doesn't mean we don't have opportunity for characters to express themselves and have dialogue with NPCs, et cetera, et cetera. But my pacing might be different. But I love definitely slow burn gaming, and most of my local sessions over the last 12 years. When I involve sandbox or open world or even running pre-written stuff like some of my mini modules for my Island of Sewell, etc. Um, I'm in no hurry to get to a particular thing. I'm in no hurry to see something occur. I just want to play and I want them to engage everything. So if they decide staying 2 days in Farendell, if Dell for some reason had been smitten by the girl and wanted to stay a couple of days, kick his feet off and say, "We're in no hurry. We can go to that mine in 2 days. I wanna court this girl." That becomes part of the session. That becomes part of why we role play. It may not be relevant to the two other players going, "Dude, let's, I kind of want to kill goblins tonight," right? I mean, that's part of the session zero culture of play. What are we really here to do, right? So anyway, I thought it was great because we got 2 hours of character building. We got 2 hours of learning who Sam's hobbit is, or Sam's half man is, and we definitely know who David is and what David's about, which I love. David is very good at doing it concisely. I mean, David is very. I talk about Hemingway-esque. I love to be Hemingway-esque. Short, concise phrases that tell us everything, but leave a little window for us to imagine more to that. David is a master of one sentence expression or one sentence, a couple of sentence description, and we know exactly, right. But yet not so verbose that we aren't imagining there's more to this story. David's left something out, and I love it, right? And of course, Dell, how Dell goes about being in the character's shoes all the time. And that's good, right? I'm okay with that. So my point is, we got to learn who these guys were in 2 hours, and they have yet to get to the actual mine entrance, which would start the actual dungeon, the mini module, right? But there were many moments of decision. They come to crossroads. What are we going to do? I don't want them to ever feel like they got to do something we set out to do. I presented them with the dilemma of the old track off to the west. Off to the east. Does this take us to the mine, or does the main road take us to the mine? And the map they had was not adequate. Did not adequately describe where the mine is in relationship to just being north of Farendale. Dell's character investigates and he puts two and two together. Yes, probably this old mining road. He sees some tracks and they decide, okay, this must be where we climb up toward the mine. And they start the ascent with a mule and a cart. And they have great conflict, right? There's this amazing moment between Dell's elf and David's elf. David hears there's an impending war looming, and David expresses plainly he's not here for that. He wants nothing to do with an impending war between the dwarves and the elves. And Dell's character, we learn Dell's elf is like, these are our people. Where's your honor? Where's your integrity? Wouldn't you want to help these people? And to me, that's all storytelling is. It's conflict. And it's conflict between human beings and conflict between characters, and it's conflict between sometimes violent conflict, sometimes interpersonal conflict, sometimes internal conflict, right? Sometimes it's a character deciding whether they want to do the thing or can do the thing, and then sometimes it's trying to convince your party mate, or understand your party mate's motivations, etc. And so this to me is why I do it. And this is why I love it. And we have this amazing moment at dinner between those two, right? Dale challenging his elfhood, so to speak, and David saying, "Dude, I am not here for that." And David doesn't have to get into the hard details of why. His character is just making it clear, I want nothing to do with this. There doesn't have to be some grand explanation. As we're learning who David's character is, and we're learning who's Dell's elf is. So we got two elves completely immediately within a 45 minutes of the session. They're conflicted about the very village they're in as an elven village and what may be happening to these people, etc. Right? And I thought this is role play. This is character building. So we learned who these guys are, and then we have a great, again, conflict a little bit between Elf's ranger, Dell's elven ranger, kind of leading the group and wanting to give orders to the halfling, drive the cart up the mountain, and you get out with me, Eberus, and we're gonna stride the sides of this and make sure we're not ambushed. And so he's got this kind of idea how they're going to do this safely, which makes complete sense. But the halfling blanches at it. The halfling says, "No, it's not what I'm not going to do that." So we have these amazing moments where I'm very patient to allow the slow burn and watch these characters present themselves. And they're either going to bond and have allyship, or they're going to kind of dislike each other, right? Arig in our job campaigns, Arig, my young 17-year-old human surviving fighter, having to deal with Dell's halfling businessman Trotter, and how Arig just is gotten to a point where he just doesn't trust and ultimately does not like Trotter, despises Trotter. That comes up through our role play. It comes up through how Dell imbues the character with a personality, and I imbued my character with a personality, and Arig literally doesn't like Trotter. It's not personal. I don't dislike Dell. I don't like my character doesn't like Dell's character, right? And I can't help but feel it. The minute I step into Eric's shoes and Trotter's involved, I'm as Eric, I'm irritated, right? Because we have fundamentally different values. And I love that. I love being able to get into Eric's shoes and do that. And so these things present themselves in Todd's game, Joff, using old school essentials brilliantly, right? And we learn about the world, and the world building occurs uh, as we play as well, right? And as we experience things, that becomes part of canon for our player knowledge that our new characters might not know, but we know, which adds a richness to the 39 sessions over 4 years of enjoying Joff with Todd. So this is why I grew up doing it. This is why I love doing it. This is why it's still my preferred choice of gaming, the D20 D&D-esque OSR. Despite and I love our game. I love why we made our game, and I love the whole intent of how we asked the GM to do a different thing in our game, and how we asked the players to take more agency. But it is not in my DNA like D&D Moldvay is, and the old OSR style of D20 is. And so I'm always going to want to come to this place, and I'm going to want to always keep my feet in it as a GM. I'm going to want to run games like this, and I tend to be low fantasy. I say low fantasy. However, Lord of the Rings was a primary inspiration for me growing up, and is still as an adult. I read the books generally annually, not all 4 of the books, but I always read The Hobbit annually, and I'll read the Lord of the Rings books probably every 3 or 4 years. But so that is high fantasy, but in many ways we stay among the low to tell those tales of these burgeoning heroes. But I love that, and I like the black and white, good and bad of that, good and evil of that. I like that there's not a lot of moral grays in Lord of the Rings. I want sometimes my fantasy to be clear and concise. This is evil. Don't worry about some of the moral questions of waging war, right? However, I generally provide in my sessions, because I like low fantasy, grounded, gritty. My actual sessions very much have gray moral dilemmas, which I can't help but enjoy, because that creates a greater conflict for interpersonal conflict for characters and players, but also between characters, like Dell and David in this session. Why? Because there's a potential war between the dwarves and the elves. Well, dwarves aren't inherently evil. Dwarves are a civilized world. They are every bit as valuable as elves. And if any players in the session had been a dwarf, there would have been a bit of a conflict when they met Wellen, right? They would have had to either somehow convince Wellen, as a they would have somehow had to convince Wellen to maybe accept this dwarf as a dwarf from the south and not a threat to them. But it would have been interesting. So the irony is, nobody played a dwarf, so we didn't have that initial conflict, which would have been fascinating. And again, it creates a moral dilemma, because I'm traveling with a dwarf. I'm not instantly going to hate dwarves, right? And these are the things I love. These are the things important to me. So I thought it was a great session. I love the slow burn, character building, world building. And yes, the next session could be harrowing and be full of action. Who knows? There could be deaths. There could be destruction. There will be probably a lot more combat, things like that. Who knows? But we can't always tell what our sessions are going to be like. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Everybody have a great week. Bye-bye.